In today's lesson, we'll be learning about the primary trigonometric ratios, also known as SOH CAH TOA. In our first example, we want to label the diagrams with the following terms: hypotenuse, adjacent, opposite. The hypotenuse refers to the longest side of a right triangle, while adjacent and opposite are relative terms. The black symbol that you see is called theta. It is commonly used to represent an angle. Take a look at the triangle to the left. I want you to take the point of view of theta. That would mean this side, which is the longest side, is the hypotenuse. This side would be the opposite side to theta, and this side would be an adjacent side. Adjacent can be thought of as beside, and opposite can be thought of as across. We're going to do the same thing with the triangle to the right. I want you to take the point of view of this angle, which is labeled theta. Since this is the longest side, this would be considered the hypotenuse. This would be considered adjacent since it is beside theta, and this would be considered opposite since it is across theta. Although these two triangles are identical, you can see that they are labeled differently depending on which angle you're taking the point of view of. In our second example, we want to label the diagrams with the following terms: hypotenuse, adjacent, opposite. In the triangle to the left, you want to put yourself in the point of view of theta. That would mean this is the hypotenuse, this would be opposite, and this would be adjacent. In the triangle to the right, I want you to put yourself in the point of view of theta. This side would be the hypotenuse since it is the longest side. This would be adjacent, and this would be the opposite side. In our third example, we want to label the diagrams with the following terms: hypotenuse, adjacent, opposite. In the triangle to the top, I want you to put yourself in the point of view of theta. This would mean this side would be the hypotenuse, this side would be opposite, and this side would be adjacent. For the triangle at the bottom, I want you to put yourself in the point of view of theta once again. This would mean this side would be the hypotenuse, this would be the opposite side, and this would be the adjacent side. SOH CAH TOA is a mnemonic. It helps us remember the three primary trigonometric ratios, which is sine theta is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. That's where the S, O, and H come from. Cos theta is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. That is where the C, A, H comes from. And tan theta is equal to opposite over adjacent. That's where T, O, A come from. It is important to remember that these three primary trigonometric ratios only work for right triangles. In our fourth example, we want to determine which trigonometric ratio should be used. The first thing you should do is identify theta. The angle we've been given is A, which is 45 degrees. I'm going to relabel this as theta. That would mean this side would be hypotenuse, and this side would be adjacent. If you look back at SOH CAH TOA, you'll notice that the trig ratio that contains adjacent and hypotenuse is cos theta is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. In the triangle to the right, again, we're going to identify the angle which has been labeled. A is equal to 45 degrees. I'm going to relabel that as theta. This side has been given to us. That is the adjacent side. And that side has been given to us. And that is the opposite side. Again, we want to look at the trig ratios and see which one contains opposite and adjacent. And that would be tan theta, which is equal to opposite over adjacent. In our fifth example, we want to determine which trigonometric ratio should be used. Let's take a look at the triangle to the left. We've been given this angle, which is 43 degrees. I'm going to relabel it as theta. That means this side, which is 3 meters, would be the adjacent side, and this side, labeled x, would be the opposite side. So the trig ratio that contains opposite and adjacent would be tan theta. In the triangle to the right, we're going to do the exact same thing. We've been given this angle of 45 degrees. I'm going to call it theta, which means that side, which is 28 meters, would be the hypotenuse. And this side, which is labeled y, would be the opposite side. So again, we're going to take a look at SOH CAH TOA and see which trig ratio contains opposite and hypotenuse, and that would be sine theta. So sine theta is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. In our last example, we're going to determine which trigonometric ratio should be used. Again, we're going to determine the angle which has been given to us, and we're going to call that theta, which means this side, which is 17 centimeters, would be called the hypotenuse. This side, which is w, would be considered the adjacent side. And you have to look at SOH CAH TOA. Which one of these trig ratios contains adjacent and hypotenuse? Well, the ratio that contains these is cos theta, which is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. In the triangle to the right, we're going to identify the angle as 28 degrees. We're going to relabel that as theta, which means this side of 12 meters would be considered the adjacent side. This side, which is labeled x, would be considered the opposite side. And again, we're going to have to refer to SOH CAH TOA and see which trig ratio contains opposite and adjacent. And that would be tan theta, which is equal to opposite over adjacent.